Done, Dad. My daughter said it across a conference table at Hartwell Property Group, not in my kitchen, not over the phone. She said it in front of 11 people, 2 attorneys, the CFO, 3 board members, and a handful of regional managers who'd worked under me for years. You're done here, effective today. She slid a manila folder toward me. Separation agreement. Termination of consulting contract. My name, Thomas Briggs, printed at the top in 12-point Times New Roman. The same font I'd used to draft the company's first operating agreement 31 years ago. I looked at the folder. Then I looked at her. I said, "All right, Nora." That was it. No argument, no scene. I closed the folder, set it flat on the table, and stood up. I thanked the room, and I walked out. She expected something else. I could see it in the way her jaw held, waiting for the resistance she'd been rehearsing against. But I didn't give it to her, because I already knew something she didn't. I started Hartwell in 1993 out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. My wife Beverly and I used our tax refund and a small business loan from Fifth Third Bank to buy our first duplex in Clintonville. She handled the books. I handled the properties. We didn't take a real salary for the first 3 years. By the time Beverly passed in 2011, Hartwell had grown to 47 units across Franklin County. Nothing flashy. Residential rentals, a few small commercial spaces, steady cash flow. The kind of business that doesn't make the news but never stops working. After Beverly died, I threw myself into the company. It was the only thing that made sense during those years. My daughter Nora, who was 28 at the time, started coming into the office more. She had an MBA from Ohio State. Sharp instincts, her mother's eye for people. I made her VP of Acquisitions, then President in 2018, when my knees started giving me trouble and my cardiologist started using words I didn't like. I stepped back from day-to-day operations. I stayed on as a senior consultant, 50% time. It was my name on the door, my relationships with the banks, my personal signature still backstopping 3 of our major credit lines. I thought that arrangement was understood. It wasn't. The first signs came slowly, the way most things do when you're not looking for them. In early 2023, Nora restructured the management team without telling me. New titles, new reporting lines. I found out from our property manager, a man named Pete who'd been with us since 2006, when he stopped by my house to ask if I knew his position had been reclassified. I didn't. I called Nora that evening. She said she'd meant to loop me in, said it was a minor adjustment. Said, "Dad, you told me you wanted to step back." I had. But stepping back isn't the same as being erased. Then in the fall, she brought in an outside consultant, a firm out of Cincinnati, to evaluate our portfolio. I wasn't included in the kickoff meeting. I found out about it when one of their analysts called my cell phone by accident, thinking he was reaching our CFO. He apologized. I told him it was fine. It wasn't fine. I sat on the back porch that night with a cup of decaf and thought about something Beverly used to say. She'd say, when someone shows you how they see you, believe them the first time. I believed her. And I started making some quiet decisions of my own. The decision I'd made 7 years earlier, back in 2016, was one I never talked about much. That year, Nora had pushed hard for a rapid acquisition strategy. 12 new properties in 18 months, financed primarily through debt. I understood the logic. Interest rates were low, the Columbus market was climbing, it made sense on a spreadsheet. But I'd watched markets long enough to know that leverage is fine until it isn't. So before I signed off on the expansion, I did something I didn't advertise. I worked with our attorney, a quiet man named Frank who'd handled Hartwell's legal work for 2 decades, to restructure how our flagship assets were held. 4 of our highest-performing properties, 2 commercial buildings downtown and 2 large residential complexes in Westerville, were transferred into a separate LLC I controlled personally, Briggs Capital Holdings. The transfer was documented, disclosed to our accountant, reported on that year's taxes. It wasn't hidden, it just wasn't discussed at dinner. The rationale was straightforward. If the acquisition strategy over-leveraged the main company and something went wrong, the core assets would be protected. Beverly had always insisted we keep something that couldn't be touched. I was honoring that. The board had been informed in a footnote of the 2016 annual report. Nobody called me about it. Nobody asked questions. Nora, I learned later, had never read that section. In 2024, When she slid that termination folder across the table, those 4 properties were still in Briggs Capital Holdings, still mine, and they represented, according to the most recent appraisal, just over 40% of what Hartwell's lenders considered core collateral. I drove home that afternoon through downtown Columbus, past the short north where Beverly and I used to walk on Sunday mornings, past the street where our first duplex still stands, repainted now, with a new mailbox, somebody else's tenants living in it. I didn't feel angry. I felt the particular tiredness that comes not from being hurt, but from being right about something you'd hoped you were wrong about. My phone buzzed before I pulled into the garage. It was Ron Whitfield, our primary contact at First Midwest Bank. Ron had handled Hartwell's commercial lending for 9 years. He and I had shaken hands on 3 separate deals. "Thomas," he said, "got a strange email from Nora this morning. Says you've transitioned to a non-operational role. That accurate?" "It is," I said. "And your personal guarantees on the 21 credit line?" "Still in place," I said, "until they're renegotiated or I remove them." There was a pause. "I'm going to need some clarity on the collateral structure," Ron said carefully, "because the way I read your files, Briggs Capital is still listed as security on 2 of our instruments." "That's correct," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "Thomas, I'll be honest with you. We're going to need a conversation with you directly before we can move forward on any renewal requests." I told him I understood. I thanked him. I ended the call and sat in my driveway for a few minutes watching the neighbor's dog investigate something in the grass. Then I went inside and made dinner. The next morning, I called Frank. He already knew. Nora's office had reached out to him the previous afternoon, asking for a full accounting of any assets held outside the main Hartwell entity. Frank had told them he'd need my authorization before releasing anything. "She didn't know," he said. "It wasn't a question." "She never asked," I said. "Didn't seem boring enough to bother with." Frank made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "The Westerville properties alone appraised at 4.2 in December." "I know. Thomas, she is going to be in a difficult position with her lenders if she can't account for the collateral gap." "I know that too." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" I looked out the kitchen window at the oak tree Beverly and I planted the year Nora was born. It was enormous now, wider than either of us had imagined it would get. "I want to do this right," I said. "I'm not trying to hurt the company, but I'm not going to disappear quietly either." "That's fair," Frank said. "I'll put together a collateral summary. You let me know when you're ready to have the conversation." By 10 o'clock that morning, I had calls from 2 other lenders. Both of them had received notices from Hartwell's new communications process, something about consolidated point of contact, and both of them had questions I was better equipped to answer than anyone in Nora's office. I called them back one at a time. I explained the situation calmly. I told them the company was undergoing a leadership transition. I told them my personal guarantees remained in effect until formally amended. I told them nothing would disrupt their positions without proper notice. They thanked me. Both of them said some version of the same thing. "We prefer working with you directly, Thomas. Let us know how this develops." My phone rang again. I looked at the screen. "Nora." I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Dad." Her voice was tight, controlled, but barely. "Nora. Ron Whitfield called me. He said he needs to speak with you personally before renewing the Q3 line. That's his prerogative. You're no longer in an operational role." "I'm still a guarantor on 3 credit instruments," I said, "and I still own Briggs Capital Holdings." Silence. "What is Briggs Capital Holdings?" she asked. And in those 4 words, I could hear the precise moment when understanding arrives before you're ready for it. "It's a holding LLC I established in 2016, I said. "It's listed on page 47 of that year's annual report. It holds 4 properties, 2 on High Street and the Westerville complexes. Frank can send you the documentation." Another long silence. "You never told me." "It was disclosed," I said. "I presented the restructuring rationale to the full board at the 2016 review. You were there." "I didn't." She stopped, started again. "I didn't understand that was what that meant." "I know," I said gently. "You were focused on the acquisition deck. I wasn't trying to be cruel. It was just the truth. Dad." Her voice shifted. Less executive, more daughter. "Those properties are part of what First Midwest considers our core collateral base. I'm aware. If you withdraw them, I haven't withdrawn anything, I said, and I have no plans to, provided things are handled reasonably. Another pause, shorter this time. We need a meeting. Have Frank call your office, I said. He'll set something up. The meeting was 4 days later. Neutral ground, a conference room at a law firm on Broad Street, not Hartwell's offices. Nora came with the CFO and their outside counsel. I came with Frank and a man named Bill Dreer, a property attorney who'd worked on the original Briggs capital transfer. Nora looked tired. Not the tired of someone who hadn't slept, but the tired of someone who'd been doing math she didn't like for 4 days straight. I sat down. I didn't lead with the leverage. I led with something else. Nora, I said, I built this company with your mother. We started it before you were born, and she was part of every major decision until she couldn't be anymore. I stepped back because I trusted you. I didn't step back because the company stopped being mine. She looked at the table. You dismiss me in front of people who've worked for us for 20 years, I said. I don't know what you expected me to do with that. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said I needed them to see that I was in charge. Not you, me. I understand that, I said. Do you? Yes. And I also understand that wanting to be seen as in charge and actually being prepared to lead aren't always the same thing. That landed harder than I intended. I watched her absorb it. I wasn't trying to erase you, she said finally. You terminated my contract in a room full of witnesses, I said. What would you call it? No answer. Frank set the collateral summary on the table. Bill walked through the Briggs capital structure, what it held, how it was documented, what its removal would mean for the company's lending position. Nora's CFO took notes and didn't say much. Nora's attorney started to say something about fiduciary duty. Frank interrupted him quietly and pointed to the 2016 board minutes where the structure had been approved. The attorney read them. Then he set the pages down. There's no actionable claim, he said to Nora, just audible. The room was quiet for a long time after that. What Nora proposed, or what her team proposed, I suspect after a long weekend with their advisors, was a formal consulting agreement, not the vague arrangement we'd had before. A real contract with defined scope, compensation, and a 2-year term. I would remain the named guarantor on the existing credit instruments until they matured. Briggs Capital Holdings would stay in place, with a right of first refusal clause, giving Hartwell the option to acquire those properties at appraised value if I chose to sell. In exchange, I'd have a seat at the table on any major capital decision, acquisitions over $2 million, refinancing, new credit facilities, not a veto. A seat. I read the draft twice. Then I called Frank. It's reasonable, he said. It's more than I expected, I told him. She's smarter than she acted, he said. She just needed to learn the cost of what she didn't know. I signed the agreement on a Thursday afternoon in Frank's office. Nora came herself, without her attorneys. She signed across from me and didn't say much until after it was done. Then she said, I owe you an apology. You do? I said. I'm sorry, Dad, for how I did it. I looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. She had Beverly's forehead, Beverly's way of holding her shoulders when she was trying not to show she was uncertain. I'm not interested in being your adversary, I said. I never was. I know, she said quietly. I think I was afraid you'd never leave if I didn't force it. I was going to leave, I said. I just wanted to be asked. She nodded, didn't say anything else. Sometimes the honest thing doesn't need a response. That was 14 months ago. Hartwell is still operating. Nora made a smart hire in a new VP of operations, a woman out of Cleveland who knows the Columbus market and doesn't need hand-holding. The acquisition pace has steadied out. The lenders are comfortable. I come in on Tuesday mornings. I sit in on capital review. I drink bad coffee and listen more than I talk, which Beverly always said was the best version of me anyway. Briggs Capital Holdings still exists. The 4 properties are professionally managed. They throw off enough income each month that I don't worry about much. I've started talking to a financial planner about what happens to them after I'm gone, whether they become part of Nora's inheritance or whether I carve out something for a few long-time employees who made this company what it is. I haven't decided yet. Pete still manages 2 of our Clintonville properties. He sent me a text last month out of nowhere. Mr. Briggs, just wanted to say, Things feel steadier now. Thank you. I don't know exactly what he meant by it. I took it as a compliment. Some mornings I drive past the old duplex in Clintonville, the one Beverly and I bought with that tax refund in 1993. The maple out front is bigger than it was. The porch has been redone in Trex decking, which Beverly would have had opinions about. I think about what she'd say about all of this. The boardroom, the folder, Nora's face when she finally understood what Briggs Capital meant. She'd probably say something practical. She usually did. Something like, "You prepared. That's all you can do. That's all I did. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't call the newspapers or post anything online or try to embarrass my daughter the way she'd embarrassed me. I just made sure, years before any of this happened, that I couldn't be discarded like an old piece of furniture. Because here's what 63 years teaches you. If you're paying attention, you don't need to be loud to be unmovable. You don't need to win the argument in the room. You need to have already done the work before the argument starts." She thought she was showing me the door. She was showing me how little she'd read the blueprints. The company is still standing. So am I. And for the first time in a long time, we both know exactly where we each stand. That's not a small thing. At my age, that's almost everything. If any part of this sounds familiar, if you've ever built something and watched someone underestimate what it cost you, I'd like to hear about it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you built. And if you want more stories like this one, about the quiet decisions that matter more than the loud ones, subscribe. We share them here every week, because sometimes the most important things a person does, nobody sees until it's already done. I've thought a lot about what I would tell a younger version of myself, the man who signed that first loan at Fifth Third Bank with Beverly sitting next to him, both of us pretending we weren't terrified. I'm not sure that younger man would have believed any of this was coming. Not the company growing the way it did, not losing Beverly, not sitting across a conference table from his own daughter while she handed him a termination folder. What I've come to understand, and it took most of my 63 years to get here, is that consequences don't announce themselves. They build quietly, the way interest compounds, the way a tree grows. You don't notice the roots until someone tries to pull the thing up and finds out how deep they go. Nora made a decision that morning based on what she could see. She could see titles. She could see auger charts. She could see who sat at the head of the table. What she couldn't see, because she hadn't looked, because she'd assumed was everything underneath. The credit structures, the collateral, the relationships built across 2 decades with people who knew my handshake before they ever knew her name. She confused the surface for the whole story. That's not a character flaw. That's what happens when ambition outpaces curiosity. When someone spends so much energy trying to prove they've arrived that they forget to understand where they're standing. I don't say this to diminish her. Nora is sharp. She's capable. She's going to run that company well, and part of me has always known that. But capability without humility is an engine without steering. You can go very fast in a very wrong direction. The part that took me longest to sit with was my own role in it. I had stepped back gradually, year by year, without ever having a direct conversation about what I still held and why. I told myself the documentation was sufficient. It was. Legally, it was. But there's a difference between what's documented and what's understood. I could have sat down with Nora and explained the Briggs Capital structure plainly. I didn't. Some part of me, I think, hoped she'd be curious enough to find it herself. That was my failure. Integrity isn't only about what you do in the hard moments. It's about what you build in the quiet years before the hard moments arrive. Every decision I made from 2016 onward, the LLC, the proper disclosures, Frank's careful documentation, was made not out of suspicion but out of responsibility. I had employees who'd given me decades. I had lenders who'd taken my word. I had a company Beverly and I had built out of nothing, and I owed all of it the kind of preparation that doesn't make headlines. Wisdom, I've decided, is mostly just paying attention long enough to see how things actually work. Not how you wish they worked, not how they look in the short term, but how they actually move across time. And then having the discipline to act on what you see, even when nobody's watching, even when it's tedious, even when the person sitting across from you at dinner has no idea you're doing it. Nora and I are in a better place now. Not repaired, that's the wrong word. clarified. We know what we each bring. We know what the other one needs. That kind of clarity is hard to come by and harder to maintain, but it's the only foundation that holds. Beverly would have gotten there faster. She always did.